What happens when technology advances faster than our ability to make sense of it? How do we stay human in a world where intelligence can be outsourced to algorithms? Today on The People Blueprint, we explore the evolving intersections of learning, AI, and leadership with a guest who has been navigating this very terrain for over 2 decades. Ambrish Rastogi is a seasoned learning and HR strategist with a career built at the crossroads of human capability and emerging technologies. Today, he helps organizations adapt their learning ecosystems to stay relevant in a rapidly digitizing world. This is not just a conversation about artificial intelligence. It is a conversation about conscious intelligence. Welcome to the People Blueprint, where we unpack the future of work through the lens of learning, leadership, and people strategy. I'm your host, Sheila Vasan Singla. Joining me today is someone that I have known from the early days of his career, Ambrish Rastogi. Ambrish has worked across industries in various roles. Examples: HR consulting, people development, and now he's looking at the integration of AI into the learning ecosystems of organizations. So, Ambrish, let's start with your journey. You've spent 2 decades in learning and human development. I want to know what has changed in the way organizations view learning and what has evolved in the way that learners engage today in the process of learning.
Fair enough. Sure. So let me take the organization's part first, Sheila. Um, I think learning has become increasingly more central to a strategy of any organization. That's the first change I can see if I just step back and look at the past 2 decades, right? From being an organization from being a team which was responsible for new joiner induction, ethics and compliance trainings, it has become a function where the survival of the organization, the future of the organization depends on how fast you can build from within. The war for talent has been one key factor, right? So instead of buying talent, building has become more central to it and hence learning. So an organization's view fundamentally is paramount importance of learning to keep them future ready. Uh, Also, what's happening is if you take the metaphor of a kitchen and a drawing room, especially in the services sector, uh, clients like to take a peek into the kitchen to understand how is it cooking, what's cooking, and that tells them the sustainability of the organization they're partnering with. And hence it's learning and for that matter, other HR functions become very, very central and key to how you're building the talent. So your sustainability depends on that. That's, 2 cents about how organizations are looking at it. Coming to learners, I think it's far more nuanced, far more dynamic. But if I was to think through some of the common aspects from a learner's perspective, one thing I've realized is needing things to be at a more personalized level. Recommendations, content, the way it's delivered. I'm looking for, as a learner, wearing a learner hat, I'm looking for what works for me. Not the persona I represent. That's a static profile. What works for me? Where am I stuck today? So that's one. Two, complicated with the fact that my attention spans move from minutes to seconds. Right? I want it quickly. If I can't get the answer very quickly, I tend to switch. It's almost like trying to move from one OTT episode to another OTT episode. How can I get hooked onto the learning faster? So from a learner perspective, it's paucity of time. It's need for it to be more tailored. It's need for it to be non-judgmental, which is very, very important. Will I constantly get assessed? Is it a safe learning environment? I value these things as a learner because that allows me to be free, allows me to grasp without any stress and pressures, allows me to be more productive.
So, against this backdrop and what I felt about it as well, what do you think has remained constant as the building blocks in this complete world that is changing?
That's interesting, and I've said this in some places before as well. I think one thing which we all should remember, and I personally use it as my own mantra, is context is king. Content follows context, right? Everything is changing. The business context, the fundamental part about servicing a customer, making profits, being sustainable, being ethical, future oriented, sustainable businesses. I think those are constants, right? And if those things haven't changed, I think the fundamental building blocks of learning to enable those can't change, right? What is changing is the way we are delivering it. What, of course, is changing depending on all the technologies we are adopting. But the fundamental building blocks of business remain the same, and so does it for learning.
Hmm. And you're so right, because this year it's going to be 30 years of Chrysalis.
Congratulations.
Thank you, as you're aware of it.
Yeah.
Very well aware of it. And this entire podcast is a way to give back
Absolutely.
to the learning community. The one thing that I've always felt is that unless you have context and relevance to the client organization, their reality, their challenges, you may still come up with a fantastic learning intervention, but it may be of no value to the organization in the long run.
And hence doesn't get implemented.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There are
No, please, go ahead.
there's so many things called socio-technologies is a term I've read, and I think it's been used in publications as well now, where the technologies have been adopted, but it has done nothing for productivity.
Yeah.
So,
And can you imagine if the technology is actually taken away from productivity?
but it has certainly taken away jobs.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where the issue is, right? And smart queues in departmental stores in the US is one classic example people have quoted in various places, right?
Tell me more about that.
It has replaced people, so it has taken away some jobs, but it hasn't added to the speed and all the other metrics they track the queue for. So to an extent, it's hasn't helped.
And maybe it's actually reduced if somebody is not very sure of what to do when they're in that
I'm
queue.
sure there are a million nuances there which they're struggling with.
Yeah.
But step away and you realize that it's not helping the customer who you're servicing as much as you wanted to. The productivity hasn't improved by your own metrics.
Then why are you doing it? Exactly. I think sometimes we get clouded by the novelty of the technology, the flavor of the month. Those things, I think we get carried away. And what I mean by we is not just learning and development, but people. And it's natural, right? What is the flavor of the month? Everybody wants to adapt to it and adopt it. So yes, I've seen that. I've seen that in all my 30 years. There have been many flavors of the month. And then suddenly you realize it's not really moving the needle in my organization. So why should I be even looking at it?
And hence the importance of the leadership to say experiment, but know when to stop it, when to try it, when to
say that it's not working.
Say it's not working, or modify it and make it work rather than adopt it as is because you have committed to it. I think that's been one challenge which is changing, not has changed, but which is changing the way I'm thinking about learning. And it's a process at the moment, Sheila. That's all I can say.
I think we're all in that process, right? Because it's so difficult to predict what's going to happen 3 days down the line.
Yeah.
That you can't say that I've arrived and I know it all.
Yeah.
I think despite the many years I've spent in this area, I wake up every morning saying, oh my God, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to learn.
True.
And
Yeah.
I'm not being fake about it, because every day I realize there's something else that's happened and there's something else we need to learn. So I do sense that.
No, and it can be overwhelming at times.
Tell me about it.
But that's why we need to be kind to ourselves, right? We need to be kind to ourselves. That's what we, and I think, and I'm speaking, I'm thinking as I speak is, you know what? The fact that there's so much around us doesn't discount the experiences we carry, doesn't discount the intuition we carry, doesn't discount all the interactions we have. We don't count them as learning, but they're essentially learning.
And I'm going to tell you to just hold on to that thought, because as we proceed in this conversation, there are some things I really want to link back to what you've just said.
Happy to. And but yeah, this is the critical part about being kind to ourselves and stepping back and saying that we've come through a lot of changes. We've seen, yes, this is a new and a revolutionary change, but it's not that we haven't seen changes. It's not that we haven't seen events. It's not that we haven't seen, where the media went, oh, this is a dystopian moment, or this is like, wow, this will change everything else. I think we've come through those moments, and reflecting back how we navigated is essential of how we navigate any change in future, including the one currently we are going through.
So Ambrish, one of the things I remember is, and I was talking to another friend of mine on this podcast, and I said how earlier on getting books was really difficult. And I remember in the early days of Chrysalis, I would want to buy books for reference, and it would be so expensive and so difficult to get. It would take 6 months to ship from the US because it would come via seafare, not airfare. And in those days, even having simple information was difficult. Suddenly, the internet came along and knowledge became democratized.
Absolutely.
Now you have AI, and AI is making me feel that intelligence is getting democratized.
Well put.
We see people, everybody is becoming a thought leader, everybody is writing these long papers,
Yeah.
and you know where it's coming from.
Right.
So my question is that how do you see AI really reshaping uh, the learning space?
Hmm. Yeah. And this answer is not coming from AI.
I'll take your word for it.
Absolutely. How's AI shaping the learning space? It's shaping it in multiple different ways. If I look at it, first and foremost, you're right. Information is becoming more accessible. The synthesis takes care of a wider set of data. It's more structured. It's more analyzed. It's more tailored to what I need, and hence the ability to find answers quickly, ability to deliver learning at pace, ability to structure and tailor learning to a cohort's needs, a group's needs, and individual's needs. AI is enabling that. The other part is how do I deliver this learning, right? Um, how can I create a more personalized tutor, if not a teacher, to the learner? How can I create tools which help him or her practice without thinking of being judged? How can I help them prepare for any exam or any assessment or any certification? Uh, AI allows them to learn at their pace. AI allows them to be in a non-judgmental space. And AI has various methods and tricks up its sleeve which allow this learning to be more engaging, more fun, and hence keeps me hooked. Even though my attention span's low, it knows the tricks to be there. I think the what is changing, but what is more interesting is the how of the learning is changing drastically, and that's what's kind of one of the key impacts of AI on learning. Have I answered your question, Sheila?
Yes, you have. But here is a question. When you've been talking about this, one thought that comes to my mind is, will a learning professional be replaced by AI?
I think, and let me step back, not just learning, right? There's this, I've heard this so often, will AI replace and kill jobs?
Not specifically jobs, Amrish. You know, with learning becoming, or with intelligence becoming so democratized. Okay, let me step back and give you an example. Uh, I was going to have a difficult conversation with someone in my personal sphere. And I wanted to make sure that that conversation would not blow up in my face. Because when you have a difficult conversation at work, the 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 guardrails of an organizational, behavioral requirement keep you in place.
Fair enough.
But when you're having a personal conversation, there's nothing keeping it in place. So I said, I'm going to have this personal conversation with someone. It's going to be a difficult conversation. How am I going to have that conversation? And I went on to to an AI platform, generative AI platform, and I said, okay, I'm having this conversation. Guide me on how to have it. And it gave me a whole lot of steps to it. And I found that when I used about 70% of those, it worked. There were generic steps. It was not specific to the issue, or it was not specific to the relationship that we shared, but it helped. So it got me thinking that at work, will I need a learning function? Will I need a learning leader? Will I need facilitators? Will I need content designers? Or do I just go to generative AI and ask questions?
Yeah. No, and so I get where you're coming from. I get the question. See, AI brings a lot of merit, a lot of functionalities to it. It answers the what questions very well. What should I do? What can I see? All the what questions. Where today's AI, and with all the limited knowledge that I have, I'm not in the sitting in the research labs knowing what's coming out by evening today, is the why questions. So it's great at correlating and telling you in this situation this works, but why does it work? And hence, now let's look at it, or what the what versus the why, right? Let's look at it from a learning practitioner's viewpoint. And I think I said this a while ago, right? Context is king. The why is sitting in the context. The why is sitting in the context. So the learning practitioner's role will change for sure. Will it be replaced? Not if you move towards the whys, not if you answer what the AI can't. And AI is a great technology, but not a be all end all. It's for us to see how we can leverage AI to do our jobs better, faster, more efficiently, more effectively. But there'll always be enough spaces, and why is just one example of it, where a learning professional's needs remain intact. You referred to the conversation in your personal sphere. If you extrapolate it in the professional sphere, what if it didn't work?
Oh, the
Okay.
fallout would be huge.
And-
Actually, the fallout would be huge even if it didn't work in the
Personal
personal
sphere, and I'm no one to comment on the conversations in the personal sphere, but in a professional sphere, then you realize you need a human coach, because then what you need is somebody who understands the dynamics. Let me step back. Let me just take an example and put this point, right? If you get an AI to recommend a great project team for a new project, it'll analyze experiences, feedback, performance scores, degrees, certifications, trainings. It'll analyze all that. Where it might not even get data is human dynamics of one working with the other. Now, you see, that's where the context lies. That's a simple example of the context. So if a conversation has not gone down with all the, what is given you is what works in 80-90% of the cases or 70% of the cases, then you need a personalized human coach to say, okay, why didn't it work? What didn't work for you? What were you thinking in the moment? What were you feeling in the moment? These are not data. These are not data yet. And hence the role of a learning professional will evolve, will gravitate more towards the why. And those of us who can swim with the tide are going to have a very interesting time.
It's very interesting, but because what I'm taking out from what you're saying is that AI gives a lot of answers, but it doesn't know how to ask beyond the few questions that it asks.
Absolutely.
Like, why are you going through this feeling, or what are you, or why is this relationship at work not working,
Yeah.
or why is there fear? Those nuances don't get really taken into account, and perhaps that is the space that learning professionals can operate within, the more human spaces.
Yeah. And even if you train them, right? Let's assume there is an LLM on which the AI model has been well trained to ask these questions, right? But what happens is context has no boundaries, right? All models, all algorithms are with specific boundaries. But what example of human dynamics was an example where I said it's been trained on all of this set of information, which is experience, training, certification. If it is not trained on this set, it can't help you there.
It can't.
And context through intuition and experience, as a human, I know what else can get impact. Okay. And look beyond correlation to say, okay, what else is important here? Why will it work? Why will it not work? And I think that's where the learning professional comes into the picture.
Interesting.
So yeah, not asking questions is a very humane tendency. It's born out of our curiosity, and I think that part is not very easily replaceable.
How do you think AI will help us learn or learn deeper? Because I'm hearing you saying that it'll give some answers. There are some answers that it won't give, at least not right now as we see it. We don't know what's going to happen, like you mentioned, at the end of the day. Because the rate of development and innovation is so quick, we don't even know what's going to come out tomorrow. But how is it going to help us learn in a deeper way? I sometimes get the feeling that we're all skimming the surface. We are not really getting into the depth of the matter. I'll give you an example, and this might be a little before your time. Um, I remember as young children, there used to be this thing of, okay, what does this mean? And then you'd scramble across to an encyclopedia, you'd open it up, you read it, and then you'd see a cross link, you'd go down to another volume of the encyclopedia. So learning was very self driven, it was very intense, and you generally went into the depth of things. But today, when you're having a conversation with somebody, they mention a term you don't know, and very surreptitiously, you look at your phone, you do a little Google search, and then you start spouting as if you know it all. So, is AI going to help us skim the surface, or is it really going to get us into the depths of a subject?
I think that's a question for the humans, not for the AI. Do I want to get into the depths? Do I want to skim the surface? AI can help me get into the depths if I engage with it, or if I engage with the encyclopedias, if I go spend time in the library, if I speak to 15 people, if I speak to the experts at my workplace, or any mentors I have, or anyone, right, for that matter. I have multiple sources to go into the depths. AI is not dictating not going into the depths. What AI is making is your life easy. Yes. Does that give me a tendency to have shortcuts? Maybe. But I think that's where human consciousness, that's where the culture of the organization is paramount, of who are they really rewarding, who are they really recognizing, who are they really promoting. The guys who, like you said, see the word on the side and use common sense and extend the common sense intelligently, though, are the guys who really rolled up their sleeves and done a bit about that work and now speak from ground up realities, right? And I think and some of them are not the most eloquent, not the most polished. They don't have the fanciest PPTs, but they have on ground knowledge. The communication skills might be at challenges. How do the organizations look beyond these limitations to get real native intelligence to the fore? Will be key.
That's an interesting question. So, Ambrish, I want to go back to what you said about smart cues. Okay. There is a lot of buzz about productivity and AI and how it's going to make things better. But I've always wondered that in this race for productivity, are we going to lose out on compassion, reflection, kindness that human beings bring to a workspace? Because AI, in the way I look at it right now, could be this mad, frenetic workspace that is AI driven, where a lot of other things get driven out of the workspace. What's your take on it?
I think there are two parts to it. It's the anxiety of preparing for imbibing these technologies in day to day work. That has its anxiety, and anxiety causes a lot of the frantic pace. Do it faster, do it quickly, get so many people trained, get this system AI'd, etc., etc. But if I honestly, my take on this is slightly counterintuitive to the public perception. Is what you're alluding to is it'll kill the empathy. What I think is AI will do is give me a bit of time to reflect, because my job will be done faster. I won't be scampering to meet deadlines. If that happens, if the rightful productivity tools are deployed, AI empowered or other technologies powered, I hopefully get time to reflect. And why time is important? Well, all the things that you said about the human connections, the empathy. My limited experience, and I'm no psychologist, I think paucity of time is probably one of the key reasons why I'm just so focused on the task at hand and not the person in front. Why am I so focused on getting what I want rather than listening actively of where the person's coming from, getting through the objective of the meeting rather than realizing what are the struggles out there in execution. I think if I get time to reflect, or if people get time to reflect, we are human and we are all well-meaning. And if that's the assumption which I believe is true, then my ability to empathize, my ability to sit back and understand humans better, my ability to connect human to human increases. And so I think once this frenzy of getting AI enabled is over, and then it becomes BAU, not that it will ever stop. It becomes business as usual to adapt to the next. Then I think as individuals, we will be able to sit back, be less stressed about time, and be more empathetic.
So, I was in conversation a few weeks ago with another learning leader, and both of us resonated with the fact that organizations will need to stop looking at outcomes and stop looking at outputs, but start looking at outcomes. And when you start looking at outcomes, the culture of the organization changes. I think what organizations will really need to do is to learn the art of having conversations.
And just to add to that point, Sheila, I think also what, as leaders, what are some of the key imperatives I need to be working on? And leaders at different stages, right? And we can probably even visualize segregated responsibilities depending on the accountability or the seniority of or the experience that you carry. How can you think of your role slightly differently? How can you promote this time for conversations? How can you promote time for reflection? How can you promote time for collaboration? How do you build some of these nuances in an organization culture which not only promotes productivity but also promotes the humanness, the human quotient of the organization goes up?
And I think that happens when you really focus on an outcome, right? Because the other guest that I was speaking to said it so beautifully. He says, we're looking at business Q as QT, quarter se quarter tak. If you look at it in short terms, then your tactics are tactics. They're not strategies. And I think gone are the days when senior leaders looked at their stints in organizations saying, how do I make this company a legacy company? How do I make sure that it outlives not just my generation, but 2 generations after me? Today, somehow I get the feeling it's all about how do I make this quarter look good, this year look good, and how do I make sure that I manage to get better funding or sell out better or get a great opening at an IPO. So it's become very limited.
And hence, leaders need to balance the two. Which layer of the leadership is focusing on the quarter here? Which layer of the leadership is looking at 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
That's right.
I think there should be some segregation in the thinking.
Absolutely.
Of course, everybody will think of everything, but what is the percentage of time you're spending on thinking about tomorrow versus thinking about next year?
Versus the next decade.
Versus the next decade. I think that's the part which we need to kind of emphasize with the leaders to say that if you have to make the organization sustainable, future ready, you've got to find time for the
long-term thinking through it. True that. Wow. I'm liking this conversation.
I'm enjoying it myself.
I want to talk about the emerging workforce. And what I see in it is that it'll be a collaboration between humans, of course. There will be robots and there will be agentic AI. How do you see this collaboration playing out?
It's an interesting one. It'll be a bit of crystal ball gazing as it's coming alive as we speak, and probably will be the norm in the next year or so. I think we have to look at the work construct from 2-3 different dimensions, right? First of all, who's accountable for that? Right? Where does accountability lie? Will I take any and every recommendation and analysis from an AI empowered agent and use it as is, or reflect on it and challenge my own assumptions, or reflect on it and overrule the data? Just take simple example from healthcare, right? Organ transplant analytics will tell you donate the organ to the youngest or where the life expectancy, where the lung or these organ can be beneficial for the longest time. But what the data will not tell you is the ethnic communities which don't have that kind of lifespan. So do you take the AI for it, or do you hold accountability at your end? What do you use AI for? Analytics, synthesizing, interpreting, analyzing, getting the correlations in place, predicting new molecule development. What you need to use your human intelligence for is, will I be using it ethically? Will it be morally correct to do? Will it make business more productive, or will it just be another fancy technology? Will it really solve the purpose I'm solving for? And so there's so many other questions. Okay, uh, can I guide the prompts better? Can I guide the language models I'm developing better? Can I remove the biases in the data better? So there will be a set of responsibilities which will be yours. There'll be a set of responsibilities which will be with the agentic, but the ownership and accountability will be with the human, right? That's what matters. So responsibilities can be cumulative, accountabilities will still be with the human. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we distribute the roles and work with the agentic AI.
So, are you saying the human advantage in this potpourri of all kinds of resources will be the fact that we can discern, we have a sense of moral, we have a sense of ethics? Is that what you're saying our human advantage will be?
Basically, that's one example of an advantage for sure. What we are saying is what's interpreted as correlation versus what's the impact of implementing the decision. I think understanding it from various dimensions, ethics and morality is one dimension of it. Even does it even solve for the business purpose itself is another dimension. So what we are going to bring is the real intelligence, the experience, the intuition, gathering insights from other humans around it to say, yes, I've got great analysis, I've got great insights, I've got great synthesization. Everything is doing well here, right? But as humans, is it going to help for the purpose I'm starting for? The part I mentioned about context a while earlier, right? I carry the context. In the given context, will it make sense? When I expand my universe beyond these 2-3 dimensions, am I going to discriminate against anybody? And the bias is part of it, right? So the various dimensions in which humans can look at will be responsible for while working with agentics, right? But like I'll reiterate, right? The responsibility is shared, the accountability is not.
Not. Well said. So, what do you think learning professionals need to do to prepare for this seamless integration?
Tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one because as I was thinking through this question and I was going to ask it of you, I was thinking of the answer myself, and it is a tough one. What do we need to do?
While I'm thinking, Sheila, if there's something you've already thought through, please share.
No, copy. You are the guest here. I'm playing the host. But I will share some of my thoughts.
So what does a learning organization need to do to prepare better for this? For the agent?
What do learning professionals need to do to prepare for this seamless integration?
I think enable a culture of reflection, enable a culture of curiosity, enable a culture of seeing the bigger picture, enable a culture of analyzing impact from various dimensions, not just from one dimension of a balance sheet or a P&L. I think learning organizations have a big and it's quite an ask to ask people to step away, reflect, and analyze all these dimensions. And we need to prepare for them. We need to educate them. We need to ensure that it doesn't obstruct their work. They can still do their work. They can still meet the P&L goals, yet be able to do all of this while working with agentic AI. That'll be one aspect of it. Of course, the part about how do you work with agentic AI? How do you do better prompt engineering? Where should you use it more? Where should you use it less? How do you test for biases? All of that is a given. So I'm not going in that direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's hygiene.
That's hygiene. Yeah. For anybody, right? That's like
it's like saying how to use Word.
Fair point, right? What we need to reflect on what our decisions or what our outcomes will do. I think that's the part the leadership should be conscious of. And as learning professions, we need to enable that consciousness. We need to enable trainings to reflect on it and mull over it and act on it.
I think learning professionals will need to understand that AI, which seems to be the main star of the show right now, will soon become business as usual, will become the underlay, and it is how human beings behave on this underlay that'll become critical. So if I'm a learning practitioner, Ambrish, listening to our conversation, what are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that I should be preparing for?
Interesting. See, as a learning practitioner, the first thing I would say is let's get conversant with the emerging technologies, including AI, right? Let's read about them. Let's speak about them. Let's do our own trainings on those ones. And the second one is to look around for use cases. just get outside in examples of how it's being leveraged, because that will shape how we can further use it, right? But just some initial ideas of how it's being used today. What are some of the problems other learning professionals are solving for using AI? So those would be my first two. But then the third, which I think is equally important, is start experimenting with it. Start using it in your test cases. Start using it in some of your programs. See the impact, refine it, work with it. So get conversant with it, understand use cases, experiment with it. And I think these all three things I'm saying as a learning professional who wants to use AI to bolster their learnings further. And I'm not speaking about how to train for AI and how to, that part about it. And lastly, I would say, while doing all of this, don't lose the big picture of what the learning objectives are, what the business objectives are. See how this supports the learning objective. Just because it looks fancy and looks cool doesn't always mean it's a great tool to use.
Or it'll always work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a very good insight. Yeah. It just goes back to what I was telling you, right? That sometimes it's just the flavor of the month and we want to pick it up and run with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was watching something very interesting. I was watching a group of teachers talking about the use of AI in classrooms. And they were saying the conversations were very intense. And there were some of them saying, oh, I now have to check every piece of essay that comes in and I have to run it through an AI check to see whether it's been written by AI or my student. And one teacher had a very interesting insight. She said that you don't need to really try to stop them from using AI. You just flip it over. So what did she say that she was doing? She said, I tell my kids, here is the topic. Go home, use AI and write an essay. And they come back with AI generated essays. Great. Now I tell them, take a look at your essay and in class, write a counter view to it. So she's helping them learn and yet not fighting AI.
Yeah, and that AI is not always about answers, right? There are AI models in education which don't give answers, which give further probing questions. Have you tried this? Have you looked at this aspect of your questions, especially in K-12, right? There are models being built. Khan Academy's Kanmigo is probably one example which comes to mind. There are models being built to help students not get answers quickly, but help refine their thinking and help them arrive at answers. So that's also the way it's going. So AI can be used judiciously, used productively, used for the right reasons if used well.
Mm-hmm. So this brings me to a question of how is the what of learning changing? Are new skills coming in? What should be we learning now? Prompt engineering, using of agentic AI. Do you see the what of learning changing?
110%.
Are there new foundational skills that are coming into the picture?
Yeah, so I think prompt engineering will be a foundational skill, has already become a foundational skill to work. But I think that's the easy part, Sheila. How do I train our workforce? And I think we alluded to this a while ago, is how do I understand the ethical challenges with using AI-based decisions? How do I understand societal obligations while making decisions? How do I understand the bigger picture? I think those are the ones which I think we need to be training our people more
on.
The rest will become are table stakes hygiene. These are the big ones which if ignored can cause catastrophe.
Earlier on you mentioned that when we create in the olden days, when we used to create a learning intervention, we just went cut, copy, paste for cohort after cohort after cohort after cohort. How do you design learning today, in your opinion, that will stay relevant in a constant flux that our workplaces are in?
Yeah, so that was stage one, right? Where you designed the same program and used it and leveraged it with minor tweaks. Then you said, no, let me build it for a persona, a young, inexperienced versus an experienced versus this versus that. I think it's still a static profile. Static profile, what I mean is It has features which stay static, right? With my experience is this, my background is this, and hence I'm this persona. What learning needs to adapt to is a dynamic profile. What am I struggling with today? And we both can be learning professionals with similar experience, with everything similar, but what you may be struggling with today versus what I need today, the problem I'm solving for today versus the problem you're solving for today might be different. So I think our learning needs to take care of this dynamism of what we are trying to get to today, and hence understanding the learner's needs better, his or her team's needs better, his or her organization's needs better, is going to be very, very paramount for learning professionals. I know I've gone on a tangent, but I just wanted to make that point.
Hmm. So, are you saying that the learning design will, I understand when you're saying that it's going to be very fluid and it's not going to be static anymore. But would that mean that learning design would really need to keep creating all the time? How does that work? And if you were to extrapolate and, really do a what if kind of situation, are you going to have a situation where there are a bunch of people curating and creating design on the go all the time? Is that what you're seeing?
No, I think it's less about curating content. It's about training your models in a way that they can answer for multiple types of situations that we come across. It's about constantly interacting, feeding, and refining. And agentic AI as a model can learn through its own interactions, right? So it's about intelligently, with the right science, ability to refine the model continuously with new and emerging challenges. That's what I see it as. So it's not going to be a factory of creating content after content after content. It's going to be a business as usual method in which we interact with the technology so that we get better at productivity, and it gets better with its answers and its recommendations.
Which then presupposes that the organization has got relevant, updated information, standard operating procedures, FAQs, methodologies that agentic AI can work on.
Yeah, so there are tons of enablers there. One thing which I also would see is how responsibly is it being used. That's the only one I'll add, which all organizations will need to take care of. So apart from SOPs of using it, there should be a team which will validate or help explain or be the guardrails for, is it being used responsibly.
Hmm. Hmm. And do you see some universal human capabilities that will need to be focused on, irrespective the level of technology that creeps into our life?
I think you've spoken about it, Sheila, the human skills, the empathy, the compassion, the ethics of it. We spoke about context of it. All of this will remain constant.
Mm.
See, at the end of the day, we are still running. Humans are not going away, right? So we are still running with humans. So
I at least hope
humans are not going away. Any and every innate characteristic of humans still remains, right? Our need for connection, our need for curiosity needs to be vetted. Needs to be, and that's what those are some of the things which will never change. So I don't see that changing.
You know, Ambrish, it's interesting. It's been a long career for me. Almost 37 years of working, of which 30 have been at Chrysalis. And I have always managed to stay on the edge of the curve of innovation. Chrysalis has always been the first person there. We've done exciting things. I have never in my life seen a rate of change that has been as rapid as it is today. And you're just about saying, and there's another wave of change. And you're saying, and there's another wave of change. So it is just so overwhelming that I think we need to move fast as learning professionals. Generally, learning professionals have been used to being told by business what to do. And sometimes we end up being order takers. So I feel that in our minds, we need to be very clear that this is how I'm going to run ahead of business. And this is how I'm going to stay rooted to what is core to the organization and the culture of the organization.
I think learning professionals need to help the business understand how they envisage learning supporting the business outcomes, And I think that line has to be as crisp, as clean, as clear, as succinct for everybody to understand, because learn we can all use jargons in learning, right? And we're tempted to use it to emphasize a point, and that's, I think, is where we lose out on. Um, I think one more point which is very, very important from a learner's perspective, especially in an organizational context, is uh, to realize that yes, things are changing, but as a human species, we are very, very resilient. Let's not forget that. We've come through multiple changes in the past, uh, big, small, it's different. It's about time we reflect about our own resilience, and I think that will give us the power to stay afloat. How we stay afloat, I think that's for us, for each individual to figure out, and I'm sure the support systems built in all of that. But one of the key things which powers me personally is saying I've come through few, I will also go through this.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the optimist in you speaking to the optimist in me. So I have a very provocative question or a provocative area I want to go into. I feel with the advent of AI in our world and intelligence getting democratized, uh, I feel there's a lot of fakeness that may have come into the way we are. Today, when I want to respond on a message or comment on something, I get prompted by saying, would you want to make it funny? Would you want to make it sarcastic? What do you want to do? So I just feel that the true me, the authentic me, is just not coming out, is just not coming through.
So no, I hear you, Sheila. I hear you, and quite possible if I read the post, I don't know if it's written by Sheila or written by
Yes.
anybody else. Um, but when I'm looking for content, or when I'm reading, when I'm browsing, I'm looking for insights and personal experiences. Right? Any of these leading news journals, right? Uh, they start with a story of an individual before they zoom out and extrapolate it to what's the impact on the society, the government, and everything else. I think I'm looking for that. While you can craft the stories with AI, but if the insights are not genuine, not authentic, sooner than later people will lose interest in your things. I think AI is a tool to help people craft stories who are not great storytellers, but like I said earlier, they have great insights to share. But now AI is helping them share their insights. AI is helping them overcome their inhibitions to put up a good story. You are probably gifted. You're gifted with words. You're gifted in your writing styles. You can create good stories. But imagine me being constrained. But maybe I have on ground knowledge. Maybe I have right insights to share. So here is AI enabling me to share it in a manner. Yes, I'm borrowing from it. Yes, I'm. But as long as the insights, as long as my true experience, my authentic insights are coming through, then it makes sense. So as long as that experience is coming through, I think the reader is benefiting from it. My style may not be mine. I get that, but the experience is still mine.
So you're saying in a world which could be crafted, we should focus on our true, authentic experiences and insights.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
All the courses in the menu can be AI, but I think what you're looking for is the main course that you're really sitting down for is real authentic stuff. It could be dressed with different dressings. It had different, everything else around it could be AI enabled. But what I'm really here for, that part is Sheila's. And that's why I would be reading the post.
But there is the danger of AI giving you responses which could be biased. There is the danger of AI giving you responses where it might be stealing authorship.
Yes.
So, what do leaders need to do to be grounded in values in this world which is so flim flam in terms of who owns what, who said what, whose experiences are we quoting from?
Yeah, and I think, Sheila, a lot of leaders may not even have the understanding that these are the things which can happen with AI. And we need to build that awareness. And of course, we need to equip them with tools and techniques in order to understand it and counter it.
I think as we go forward, and this is just my opinion, taking on from what you have said, that somewhere along the way, learning will also need to focus on something that organizations used to do a long time back but don't do anymore, is corporate ethics or ethics of working, ethics of ownership, ethics of what is yours. This entire concept of ethics is not something that we teach in organizations. It's something we found taught in that we found being taught in, let's say, a university where they talk about an ethics course. But we don't do ethics in organizations, certainly not for leaders. I think that is going to become a big, big thing that we'll need to look at.
No, absolutely. And not just plain Jane ethics. I think how does it, different places where you unknowingly can be compromising on your own ethical standards.
That's right.
And that's the part which
And not just individually, but also as an
organization, as individuals, as teams, as at all units. Absolutely.
Earlier on, I'd asked you about the universal human capabilities. I think ethics is going to also become something that we will be talking about a lot more in the years to come.
110%. 110%.
Yeah. Earlier on when we were talking, you spoke about how we need to be kinder to ourselves and give us credit for the intuition, the experience, the discernment that we bring to the table. Now, I feel in this entire era of change, the one group that really gets beaten up are the leaders. How do you make sure, in your experience, and what would you recommend, that we should do not to overburden the leaders, yet make sure that they are guiding this change process?
Yeah, and this changes various dimensions, right? And while it may sound a little artificial, but you see, we can actually break down the layers of change, and have different levels of the organization deal with it. Let me share what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it would help.
Yeah.
I'll need some clarification.
So, where is the organization heading? Okay, where has some organizations have been there for 10 years, some have been there for 50, some have been there for longer. What's been each organization's history? How have they circumvented changes? How have they evolved? How have they progressed? What's the vision for the future? Where are they planning to get to? What are they planning to solve for? This is for the top team to weigh, right? Then let me take 2-3 steps down. Okay, this is a new technology which has come in. Okay, how will I foster collaboration? How can I get a domain expert and a digital scientist together to work on the same problem? It's for the mid management to solve for, right? At the lowest levels, right? At the first level supervisors, second level supervisors, how am I making imbibing this new technology exciting, rewarding? How am I talking about it? How am I making it a corridor conversation? How can I make it a peer-driven exercise that people are talking about it, learning about it? So now this is all three things are about change, right? All three. One is differently we collaborate. One is about setting the vision with everything that's happening, and one is about just accepting that new technology. I think all different levels of leadership will need to will play their own roles to ensure that this change is brought out. And by not putting everything on one level, I think we will manage to kind of, like you said, not overburden them with change.
I think that is so powerful in what you're saying, because invariably, whenever you talk about change, you always make leaders responsible for it. And when I'm talking about leaders, I'm not saying people leaders, but I'm talking about
Senior
leaders of an organization.
Senior leaders.
And I think what I heard you say, and it's so powerful, where you're saying that when change is so rapid, it makes sense to have different levels of accountability of dealing with change and calling out those accountabilities.
Yeah.
That if you're at a front line or an individual contributor level, what are your responsibilities vis-a-vis change? If you're at a middle level, what are your responsibilities? Senior level, what are your responsibilities?
Yeah, it'll never be 0 and 100.
Yes.
It will be mixed, but you know which is the deeper color in
That's
that,
right.
in that area, right?
Absolutely. Wow. That is really a cool way of saying it. And I think that is really the reason why, Ambrish, a lot of times change becomes so excruciatingly painful, because we have only this group of leaders that are trying to push it.
Yeah.
without the other accountabilities being called out, saying as a part of your role, this is what you have to do.
Yeah. And the business as usual work is also work.
Absolutely.
And this change is also work. So how does one not feel overwhelmed is important. And there's another thing which I think all layers need to do is to re-emphasize the resilience of the team. Not the resilience of the individual, but resilience of the team. Of the team which will get through this. And I think that part is very important to support each other. And I think we say this in various forums, right? Feeling supported, feeling cared for, and feeling that I'm contributing to the organization's objectives are probably the most important levers for keeping me going.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, now this is a fun.
Correct?
I've asked you a lot of very
Tough
you know,
questions.
I won't say tough, but I'll say at least, deep questions.
Interesting questions for sure.
Reflective questions. And I know that for me, especially out of this conversation, I'm going away knowing a lot more. It's always been like
Right.
that, Ambrish. Every time I talk to you, I go back excited, enthused, knowing a little more about the technological changes that are happening. So I'm really excited about that. But I also want to make it a little fun for you.
Okay.
So here I am asking you some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And these are not going to be the rapid fire questions like on a lot of other shows. This is, of course, related to the conversation we're talking about. And I need you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. So the first question is one thing that can never be replaced by AI.
Human intelligence.
Okay. A skill everyone should relearn in the AI era.
Contextualization.
Wow. A philosophical idea that's guiding your leadership today.
Perseverance and patience.
Okay. What's one assumption about AI you think we all need to unlearn?
That is dystopian. It's not.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ambrish. It's been such a delight speaking with you. Thank you so much for making time and for coming here. I know you are extremely reticent about being seen and heard. So your being here means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
This conversation has been thoughtful, layered, and incredibly grounding. From AI to ethics, productivity to purpose, Ambrish reminded us that staying human isn't just possible, it's necessary. To all our viewers and listeners, in a world of fast answers, let's not forget the power of asking better questions. Follow Chrysalis India on LinkedIn for more such conversations. Until our next episode, stay curious and get future ready.